We have a 20-minute workshop sort of planned now. And basically what's going to happen is we're going to share the screen and a link with the audience members, both virtually and in person here. And hopefully we can do a little bit of polling. I need to thank the SRM, Society for Range Management Grazing Behavior Committee, and the Sustainable Southwest Beef Coordinated Agricultural Project for sponsoring this symposium today. And our hope is that we'll get some pretty good attendance, or some good feedback in these little polls to be able to share with both groups to kind of help guide our research in the near future. I think Sky is going to share screen with us, and so everyone will have the opportunity to follow that link and use that code to answer a couple of quick questions. And at the same time, I'm blocking it for the folks in person here. At the same time, I'm going to open it up to questions. I'll probably jump between the chat and the folks in person so that everybody sort of has a fair share to ask and receive. So I saw a lot of fantastic discussion happening in the chat. And I'm going to start there, and we're going to go back a little ways because there's a lot of great questions. So Justin and Colin, I see we're having a bit of a conversation about like the percentage of producers currently using that technology. And Colin, I saw you sent a reply, but did you want to say anything else about that? You're on mute, sorry.
So I'm not sure how many people are using it. I know the applications of virtual fence are really starting to take off here in like the Dakotas. Especially with like the high intensity type grazing folks, they're really getting into it because it really drops. I mean, they're either paying for wire or they're paying for the use of that. So I think the virtual fence thing is really starting to grow on the application side of these technologies. Now, I just don't think I think the price right now is deterring a lot of the producers from like real-time GPS tags and stuff like that. But I think it's, in the next few years, I think it will be coming along, but I don't have right now like a percentage of people that use it. That would be something to look at.
I think that's a good question for the whole group, really. So if anybody else has something to contribute, we probably need a metric for sort of measuring who is using these tools and then being able to derive some information from that. Does anybody else have something to add? Are there questions? No, what? Oh, sure, yes. I'm not sure if you guys were able to hear that, but one of the questions in the audience for David was there a correlation between the animal weight gain and the dry matter availability in the pasture? Is that right?
Not as tight of a correlation as there was with weight gain, and that's because there was also variation in forage quality. So I think, it wasn't just total biomass, forage biomass in those pastures that was affecting weight gain. It's the combination of quantity and quality varying over time and space. And so I think it was interesting to me to see that we could actually make a better prediction of animal weight gain than we could of forage biomass.
Thank you. That was great. I wanted to jump back to a question that Lauren asked to Meredith about how does she balance objectives of even utilization and versus maintenance of sort of structural heterogeneity, specifically speaking to like wildlife habitat. Meredith, hopefully you're still with us. Maybe not. That's okay. We have lots of other questions. Was there any more audience questions? Okay. Justin asked a really good question that's sort of grand view, which is unsurprising. So Dr. Jenner asked, for the presenters today, can you please fast forward sort of 5 years into the future, and what would this symposium look like in that realm for technology adoption, and then specifically for decision making? So anybody, please feel free to jump in.
I have 3 thoughts on that. One is just about cow-proofness. Like, I really hope that 5 years from now, we've had much greater improvement in the cow-proofness of our technologies. I mean, I think we're getting there. Like I said, I had a lot of problems with breakage of devices during all of my studies. But I also have, individual collars that have survived 3 full years of abuse. So we can do it, but we're not quite there yet. So that would be, I'd say, I hope 5 years from now, we've done a lot better job with that. And then the other one, I think, is bringing together the virtual fence with more behavioral indices of foraging behavior and hence performance. Like, I hope we can see accelerometers put onto virtual fence devices that can then onboard the collar be calculating metrics that are sent back to the rancher along with the animal's location. And combining those together, I think that would be very, very powerful and would greatly improve the use or the utility of the virtual fence. Like, I don't think these behavioral monitoring things that I presented today are going to be economically viable as a device on their own. But if you're already got a virtual fence collar on your animal, you should at least be getting that extra information to help guide decision making. And then finally, I hope that in the future, we focus more on the dashboards associated with these devices. Certainly the way the dashboards are designed right now is not terribly user-friendly or rancher-friendly with any of these companies, I think. And I'd like to see more just like red, yellow, green type dashboards that are saying things are good, everything's fine with your animals, or, oh my God, you should get out there, or things are terrible, you have a big problem, or you should probably get out there and look around. But just better design to match what the ranchers need. I did think we heard that today from Meredith.
Did some of the other?
I've got
Thanks, Dr.
some thoughts on that. In addition to, I'm interested to hear what David had to say about that. I think in 5 years, we're going to see a transition in terms of acceptance of, for example, virtual fence technologies. That's just my opinion. Right now, I would say that we're firmly in the early adopter phase. I know a lot of outside the box ranchers in my area who are casually asking questions, but one of those questions is not, how do I get the collars? That said, the early adopters are here with us. People are using this stuff in a production context. But I think the question right now is still, does it work to a lot of people? 2 years ago, that was my question. I had no idea if this stuff works. But I think in 5 years, we're going to get into what I would call the management refinement phase. And 5 years is a pretty quick timeline to jump from early adopter to the management refinement. But the thing is, with the geospatial technologies that are available to us today, that's the platform that I think is going to really spring virtual fencing to that management refinement stage more quickly, where we're asking less questions about does it work and more questions about how do we best use the technology in different management contexts.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. If I can jump in there and talk in my own thing, I think something that's sort of out of our control that came up several times this morning was also battery life, and I'm hopeful that within 5 years we can sort of increase the longevity of batteries and better understand their performance, especially in these sort of hot, arid systems where there's big temperature swings, the batteries are run down, and the way that we're transmitting the data, there might be sort of smarter ways. I think Derek sort of touched on that a bit about, utilizing this combination of accelerometer and GPS data potentially to sort of get at the primary questions that we're asking about the animal behavior, about their location or any of those things, while also sort of maximizing the battery life. But others can definitely jump in too online if you just want to unmute and ask a question, because I'm pitiful at getting through the entire chat here, but please help yourselves. We have a question in the audience. Yeah.
I think one of the largest applications for the virtual fence might be in federal grazing permits, but there has to be a total change of how we view things, because we're going to have porous borders with the virtual fence. We're going to have 5% or more of the herd that are going to go where they're not supposed to go, and you can't have the opinion that there's not to be any animals within a riparian area, but if we can control the magnitude of that, so there has to be some acceptance by the agencies. No, we're not going to get exactness, but we'll accept what we can't get.
Was everybody online able to hear most of that? And I think that's absolutely true. I think one of our biggest hindrances is perhaps on the social side. We seem to all have a pretty good understanding of how the technology works, and it's going to be a little bit of getting in the mindset of the producers, which is why I really appreciate Meredith's thoughts today. But also, kind of seeing how the federal agencies are going to react to and be able to adopt this technology as well. Does anybody else have thoughts about that? There's a lot of interest in the virtual fencing, according to our poll.
I think that's a really good point, and a point that the speaker made, I think, is critical, and I made it too. Is virtual fencing is not an iron gate, but I think with riparian areas, what we're seeing right now, for example, in the Northwest, is if you have a lot of anadromous fish, you have very strict guidelines in the riparian areas, and as soon as you trip a trigger, you got to move the cattle, even if you've got a ton per acre forage in the uplands. And I think where virtual fences might help with that is it's not a tool that's going to keep 100% of the cattle out of the riparian area, but it may allow you to use 40% of that upland forage that you're not able to use right now by preventing you from tripping that trigger. So it's not a lock box, but I think there's a ton of management applications where we don't need an iron gate. What we need is to generally alter grazing distribution of the cattle.
David, I saw you nodding too. I didn't know if you had thoughts.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of, you don't need total barriers. There's just a lot, there's so many creative applications, and especially on large public land allotments.
I saw Dr. Wilmer had a thought too. Haley, are you there?
Yeah, just interesting to think from a social science perspective. Things are ramping up. I'm getting little, texts from folks in industry, and to think about sort of who pays for this and who benefits, and how we continue to engage the range science profession in building these systems in a way that helps guide adaptive management at the same time that we're developing the technologies, because those questions of the social and the justification for grazing or the monitoring are going to be really key, just as much as the sort of basic technological development. And it could reshape the way people live and work on the land, and that could be positive or negative in different contexts.
I think that goes right back to what Justin had asked too. I think perhaps in 5 years, we'll be talking about the producers and the adoption on their end much more than sort of the algorithms or algorithms that are more suited to specific needs that the producers are sort of coming back and asking for. But maybe that's too quick of a time frame. Maybe we need 10 years. I don't know. Others, Dr. Sibbles, what do you think in terms of the funding? It seems to clearly be sort of heading in this direction. Does it seem like that is a trend that will continue, or something else is going to get in our way?
That's a good point. That I don't know. If you look at the statistics that I showed, you do see successful projects funded in the area of beef cattle and grazing. So that is good. That'll probably continue. When we listen to our input from our stakeholders, we hear a lot of feedback from extension specialists about adoption and ease of use, all of these sorts of things in precision livestock farming across the board, not only for beef cattle and rangelands, but for intensive systems as well. And so the social aspects that Haley just mentioned, I think, are probably going to be pretty prominent in this symposium in 5 years, I would predict.
I agree. And we have another audience question. Yes.
Comment, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll contextualize this. So I'm applying every sensor possible at Cottonwood Field Station in South Dakota. But I think we have to ask ourselves, these cows are going to end up looking like a Radio Shack, And so what technologies and sensors are a means to an end, and which ones are permanent management devices, such as the virtual fencing? And so just any comment or opinion on that, like this Ruin Watch, yeah, we can have this and this and this, but until we get to a nanotechnology that's embedded in a cow and runs off its body heat, I think it's going to be really hard to keep layering on these technologies, especially with the IoT and communication challenges. So it's not if it's possible, it's how we do it. I think that's where we need to align strategically when we consider these technologies.
Was everybody able to hear most of that online? Do the panelists have thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go. I agree with the question that's being asked and kind of the point of it. And I think the key is to always keep the management objective in mind. As a person who, well, let's just say the GIS wasn't available when I graduated high school. There was a lot of floundering in the early days of geographic information systems because people were enamored with the technology to the extent that they forgot about what problems they're supposed to be addressing. And so, yeah, I think it's key with any technology, including virtual fencing, to keep that basic management objective in mind at all times, so that it doesn't become about the technology and what we can do with it. It becomes about the management objectives that we can help meet using virtual fencing as a tool, but not a means to an end.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that was great. Did anybody else have a comment on that? Dr. Spiegel?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much to all the speakers. This has been fantastic so far, and thank you, Matt. I guess my question is following a bit on the adoption piece, and something that comes to mind for me and as we're working in this project is how much some of these remote technologies or virtual technologies might replace windshield monitoring or on the ground monitoring and actually getting out there onto the land and seeing things with human eyes. And I was just wondering if any of the panelists had any thoughts on that, because I guess I could see it freeing up time for folks to do the types of monitoring they're interested in, like Meredith mentioned, the endangered species or the rare plant and stuff like that. But anyway, any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it replaces it. It just targets it in the right places and times and gives maybe some additional insights. I mean, for me, definitely, even if I'm checking cattle every day, I don't have a mental understanding of what their foraging behavior looks like on, say, a 24-hour basis. Like, this is a whole different way of seeing things, but you're still going to have to be out there doing all the windshield monitoring to go with it.
I was asked a couple times during my PhD, my plan was to replace the rancher with these things. And, kind of goes back to that, you know, I could see a lot of this, especially in the future, being used on sentinel animals, like maybe bulls, to where, you know, they got to drink water just like the cattle do, but there's a lot less of them. But also, you're tracking your bulls, and so I think, yeah, a lot of it's going to be used for the goal of, you know, watching water tanks, watching where, you know, the sentinel or the group is going, kind of thing, as opposed to, you know, coloring every single animal, making it look like Radio Shack. That's not only that, but also having a, you know, having a producer that has to deal with all that data, or even look at all the points that come off on a dashboard. I think it's pretty difficult, as opposed to, you know, looking at 10%.
Thank you.
Hi, Matt. Can I jump in from outside here? Can you get me on the line there? Yeah.
Yep. Dr. Waterhouse, go for it.
Yeah, I'm talking later on, but sorry, Sherry. I can't imagine a scenario where this is not going to change the way that ranchers and farm workers work. Every other element of automation we've ever adopted in farming has changed it. So why won't this? The question is, it's a key tool to make good farmers better. But I think that it won't do. And I think fundamentally it's got to be paid for somehow. And the best way that people can pay for things is to save time. So there'll be a real stress to use their time better, which probably means less as well. So if it doesn't happen, I'll be surprised. Talk to anybody who's put in a robotic milker and says, has it saved you time or not? If it hasn't saved them time, then they should have carried on milking the cows themselves. You know, so I think that's where we're at. So just come back to the real world. This is why people automate and mechanize to do things with their time. So that's just my my 2 pence. Sorry, I've got 2 screens here. I'm looking at the wrong one, Matt. Sorry. I'm not, you haven't even got my picture on, so it's even better. So I'll now chip out. Okay, bye.
That's quite all right. We have another audience, a couple audience questions. Kirsten, did you have?
Well, it's not really a question, it's just a comment that the average size of the families that are paying funds are smaller these days. So we need more options to help manage our
I agree. Would you guys second that? Hopefully you were able to hear. Basically, the size of operations and families are the operations are getting larger, but the family size is getting smaller. So we need sort of additional tools in the toolbox to be able to help us monitor and manage.
Just ag in general, I mean,
Yeah.
nobody's getting help.
Yeah, the labor force is definitely a huge problem.
Area of work.
Absolutely. We had another person.
Yeah, well, it kind of follows that as well. I mean, that's one of the big challenges is finding skilled labor, as I talked to the producers in Nebraska there, and then finding people. So relying on technology may become the crutch in a sense, because they can't find, or we can't find the right people to come in labor. But I did have some conversations about how if I was going to spend X amount of dollars on technology or X amount of dollars on having a person there that could be out with the cattle, visually observing, moving and throwing checks on, then for the sake of the community, for the sake of the ranch, other things that technology can't do, it's better said to spend that money on somebody that's skilled labor. Right? And so I just thought that was kind of an interesting comment that they put that there. But one of the biggest questions we always get right now is how do I find the labor that I can get on our ranch? And just the second part of that is if we talk about this, we get kind of 2 camps. Those that are kind of like, this is really interesting and helpful, and another camp that basically says we've been successful ranching for hundreds of years, and we've learned along the way, we've adopted new technologies, but taking the human element out of it is something that's really afraid of.
Yeah.
New technology, in a generation, are we going to lose skills that require a person to be out there working cattle in maybe a less efficient way?
Could everybody hear Dr. Stevenson's points? Hopefully online. Yeah, I agree. I wish we had a handheld microphone, but they didn't. They didn't give us one, so sorry about that. I totally agree with you. Yeah. And does anybody else have a follow-up?
Yeah, I agree there. I do also think another big place for cost savings though is just fencing. I mean, fencing is really expensive nowadays, and at least the vents is coming down to where it's in the ballpark of, you know, cost for just replacing a couple miles of fence.
Yeah, we have another comment.
So if you look at the innovation cycle, the bottom line is we want animal benefits, production range benefits with lower costs. That's going to be hindered by use. And so as that innovation cycle increases, you're talking about the next 5 years, we have to build up range animal science students who can have the cultural component, the programming, modeling, and precision technology skills. And so I think while, you know, there's a good point with this culture in all our extension talks, we try to say, hey, we're not discounting producer culture. At the same time, it's an opportunity for, I think, rural reinvigoration, where someone who can't come back to the farm can be a precision specialist who knows the physics of ranging and how this sensor or management won't work in this when it's -40.
Yeah.
And so developing these students now is going to be really exciting to, I think, provide key opportunities to get back on the range in different capacities.
You know, speaking to that point, and something that Mitch sort of made me think was that I totally agree. I think that the students are going to sort of come on board as we see like the precision, even faculty positions opening. And then I'm assuming, and maybe it's a big assumption, but the next step would potentially be like, you know, actual extension agents who are specializing in this extension or in this precision kind of work, who then the producers could sort of rely on as their tech specialists. But I'll go back to the group, see if they have thoughts about that. And I have a question from Dr. Utsumi.
I think that academia is coming from behind. This research, new technologies are coming out, right? And tested and adopted by farmers, in particular, east side, the Midwest side, and then moving into the west, the large range country. It's amazing, right? It's coming up every day. You are having technology and to stay up to date. You know, yeah, it's almost it's very difficult. And I think that regards to the preparation for the next generation of professionals, it's also a need for the universities to start adapting to this new era of modern developments. And I think there is a need for much more synergy between the private sector, the companies, startups, and the assets are coming out with new innovations and technologies, and then the universities to have more independent testing and work, coming back and separate like so hopefully we will see more of those models in the future.
I agree. Hopefully you were able to hear some of that. Basically, we're talking about needing to get more synergy between the private sector, the companies who are developing these tools, and then the academic sector, so that we can sort of independently test and validate these things and make sure that they're working in the best interest of the producers. Because I think Derek did a pretty good job sort of explaining a lot of the pitfalls of some of the various types of technology. And yeah, that's something that we're going to have to navigate as a group, I think. Did anybody else want to comment on that? Corey's asking a question.
Yeah, I just got a comment. I work for the Forest Service, and we're looking and implementing on one of our allotments vents this year. Couple of concerns that we had were, how do we help them manage it, but allow them to keep the data so that it's not foilable? We don't want like Grand Canyon Trust or some of these people that are trying to shut us down to get a hold of information that could be detrimental to them. So that's one of the things that we've done, is we've reached out to Utah State Extension to help allow them to do the studies and the aid with the rancher, and then we just kind of stand back and do what we've always been doing. But that's the way we're trying to go around it.
And Corey, are you able to provide support for things like base stations?
Yeah, we'll provide support in either putting them up or support and funding with the actual towers. We've gone in with Utah has a grazing improvement program, and they'll match dollars if we can put them up. But we're starting small on a smaller operation where, you know, some of those guys running 1,000 cattle. That's kind of hard to justify putting 1,000 collars out. But we've got a guy that runs about 200 head. His operation, his allotment was affected by a fire last year. To replace those fences that were burning that fire, it's going to cost about $150,000 versus $40,000 to try vents. So to him, that's worth it.
I hate to break up the discussion. Oh, sorry. No, please go ahead.
I was just going to ask, and have the grazing associations been receptive towards funding base stations instead of rebuilding fence?
So far, they are. They look at it just how they would look at funding a fence or a water improvement. Until we get proof otherwise, if it fails, I don't think that they will stop funding that.
I'm going to transition us into our lunch break. We're going to resume at 1 o'clock. This was fantastic. I think everybody here agrees, discussion. And we have 2 more workshops built into this afternoon. So if the morning speakers want to be there, again, no pressure, but I'm sure that we would pick up right where we are and continue the discussion. So this is really excellent. And yeah, thank you again to all the speakers. This was a fantastic group. We're all clapping here.
Thanks, Matthew, and everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you.